Everybody, and welcome, and thank you so much for attending today's exciting webinar, Mastering Frontal Hairline Design. We're excited to offer each of you valuable insights to help you enhance your knowledge and skills in hairline design. So before we get into the topic, let's take a quick look at our agenda. We'll be joined by our esteemed instructor, Dr. Shah, who will share his expertise on frontal hairline design. He'll deliver a comprehensive presentation for about 30 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. Please use the Q&A button on your Zoom screen to submit your questions for Dr. Shah, as attendees will remain muted throughout the session today. In total, the webinar is expected to last about 45 minutes. So let's introduce Dr. Shah, our esteemed expert specializing in hair restoration surgery. He graduated from St. George's University of London, previously worked as an otolaryngology doctor before dedicating his time to hair restoration surgery. He's dedicated to staying up to date with the latest advancements in cosmetic hair transplant surgery and regularly attends conferences and workshops. His research articles have been published in peer-reviewed journals, and he's presented his work at national and international conferences. He is also part of the esteemed team at the private clinic, where he provides comprehensive and personalized hair transplant procedures. Dr. Shah, we are so excited to have you as our instructor today, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Alice. My name is Dr. Shah, and I will be presenting today's presentation on mastering the frontal hairline. So this will be a very comprehensive and educational session where we'll cover all the essential things that you need to know in order to design a frontal hairline, both in men and women. So we'll get started straight away. Okay. Now, there are some fundamental concepts that you need to be aware of when you are designing a frontal hairline when it comes to doing a hair transplant. Now, in men, we usually tend to scale and measure the amount of hair loss that one has using a Norwood scale. And in women, we use the Ludwig scale. Now, all of these concepts that I'm about to discuss can be used in both men and women and are essential when designing the frontal hairline. Now, the first part, the first sort of point that we'll touch on is the mid-frontal point. Now, this is the most anterior point of the frontal hairline within the midline. And it's arguably one of the most important features when using sort of facial anatomy in order to design a frontal hairline. The next fundamental component that we will look at is the mid-pupillary point, which lies just lateral to the mid-frontal point. This, again, I will go over in a little bit more detail as to how they are linked together and how they're used together in order to make an aesthetically pleasing and natural hairline. And the transition zone is the most anterior zone of the frontal hairline. Now, this is the part of the hairline that we see most commonly in both men and women that gives us that natural look that most of our clients are aiming to achieve. Now, in the transition zone, it's again another topic that we will cover in detail. You have your single hair follicles, and it gives you a very natural appearance. It's a very important part of one's hair restoration journey. The next zone that we will look at is a defined zone. Now, this lies just posteriorly, so directly behind the transition zone. And this is where the frontal hairline begins to appear a lot more denser. So you've got your soft single hair follicles within the transition zone. And as we reach our defined zone, we've got our doubles and our triples. And this gives us a much more denser appearance to one's frontal hairline. Now, the frontal tuft is an oval zone. This lies within the midline of the defined zone. Aesthetically, it's a critical area. And a lot of people will actually retain this area when they're losing hair. Now, when it comes to hair transplantation, the frontal tuft is a zone that a lot of surgeons and doctors will aim to give a lot of density in that area. Because when you are looking at one's face from a distance, it is the area that stands out the most. And from an aesthetic point of view, it's important to have good density within that area. Now, the frontal temporal angle is where the frontal hairline will meet the temporal hairline. So obviously, when we design a frontal hairline, we use our mid-frontal point. And as this reaches the temporal areas, we have our frontal temporal angle. I will discuss the importance of this further on along this presentation. The temporal hairline will frame the side of the face, and this runs from your frontal temporal angle to the sideburn. Again, this is a very important landmark that physicians should be using when mapping out frontal hairline design. Now, the lateral hump, also known as the lateral fringe, is located just above the side of the head in the temporal parietal region. And what this does, it will connect your permanent donor hair to the mid-scalp above. Now, the importance of the lateral hump can be used in patients that have more severe and aggressive hair loss, for example, in men that are Norwood 6 or 7, and it can be used to reconstruct the frontal hairline, and it can help physicians draw an aesthetically age-appropriate hairline in men that do have significant aggressive hair loss. The temporal points is a triangular-shaped protrusion, and this is located on the lower aspect of the temporal hairline. And again, I will cover the importance of this as we go along in the presentation. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of the regions in the previous slide, now as you can see, you have your transition zone, which is the most anterior part of your frontal hairline. Now, this is arguably one of the most important areas, as this is which will define the location and the appearance of the hairline. Now, the transition zone anteriorly will start at the mid-frontal point, and as we go along the frontal hairline, you can see that it meets the frontal temporal angles on the sides, where it meets the lateral.